Well, the Albanese government has unveiled its inaugural climate risk assessment. And according to the document, Brisbane will soon be the lost city of Atlantis and Townsville a mass grave. The modelling claims that if we don't take drastic action, Brisbane could flood 314 days a year. As for Townsville, heat-related deaths would increase by 350% by the end of the century. The report, dripping with adjectives like landmark and confronting, tells us that by 2050, more than 1.5 million Australians will be at risk of rising sea levels. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because we've heard it all before. Al Gore said the Arctic would be ice-free by 2013. Spoiler alert, it's not. A senior UN environmental official warned us in 1989 that entire nations would be swallowed up by rising seas by the year 2000. Yep, here we are, 2 decades past the deadline, and real estate prices in beachfront suburbs haven't exactly collapsed. If beachfront property is really doomed, then I have to ask, why does every climate crusader from Barack Obama to Kevin Rudd keep buying it? Didn't Elbow buy a beachfront home not that long ago? Speaking of which, here's the Prime Minister today.
Climate change is going to have an impact with more extreme weather events, more intensity, more economic cost every time there is a flood or a cyclone or a bushfire. There's a massive cost to Australia.
Sure, except every time there's a flood, it's not necessarily due to climate change, and nor is every bushfire. And the PM mentions cyclones. Well, according to the Climate Council, the frequency of cyclones is decreasing, but that's the thing about fear. It doesn't have to bear any resemblance to facts. Alliteration helps, though. The government's comprehensive assessment concludes climate risks will be cascading, compounding and concurrent. Well, I tell you what, when the government uses that much alliteration, you know things are serious. The government insists Australians are already experiencing the impacts of climate change, though, curiously, those impacts always sound like things that have been happening since the dawn of time. Floods, bushfires, cyclones, heat waves. Apparently, weather only became a problem after the Industrial Revolution. Of course, the dire modelling lands just in time for Labor to unveil its 2035 emissions reduction target, which I suspect is the point. The report seems to me less science, more sales pitch, a glossy brochure designed to scare us into accepting higher power bills, fewer jobs and more government control over every aspect of our lives. The problem for the doomsdayers is history. As I said, we've endured decades of these prophecies and they never seem to eventuate. Remember Tim Flannery's assurance that back in 2007 that dams would never ever fill again?
Even the rain that falls isn't actually going to fill our dams and our river system.
And of course, within a few years of that prediction, our dams were overflowing. The predictions are always wrong, but never in a way that undermines the narrative. And instead of saying, sorry, we were wrong, the experts simply move the goalposts further down the field, confident by the time the deadline passes, no one will remember. And even if the predictions were true, there's that small matter of arithmetic. Australia contributes just 1% of global carbon emissions, 1%. So if we shut down every coal plant, every factory, every farm, every ute, and all move back into caves, the difference to global temperatures would be precisely nil. Meanwhile, China builds a new coal-fired power plant every other week, but we're the ones told to shiver in the dark to save the planet. The report warns natural disasters will cost the economy $40 billion annually by 2050, while property values will collapse by more than $500 billion. By the 2060s, climate change will allegedly rob us of 2.7 million workdays a year. But here's the thing. Governments can't even project next year's budget deficit. They can't even keep track of immigration numbers. They can't tell you whether a major project will be finished on time or on budget. Heck, they can't even take a measly $275 off your power bill.
Reducing power prices by $275.
Reducing power prices by $275.
By 2025, $275 a year.
So they can't manage that, yet we're supposed to believe they can model the climate, the economy and human behaviour 40 years from now with decimal point precision. What we're witnessing is not science, but storytelling. Apocalypse as political theatre. The Albanese government's climate risk assessment is less about rising seas than it is about rising taxes and regulations. The climate scare is the perfect crisis, always urgent, never verifiable, and conveniently unsolvable, ensuring a permanent excuse for government expansion. So you'll forgive me if I don't lose sleep over predictions of Brisbane becoming Waterworld and Townsville turning into Death Valley. The experts have cried wolf too many times. Until the beachfront homes of climate activists start washing away, I'll keep assuming their modelling is about as reliable as their policy delivery.